This is the final word. It's the Women's World Cup Daily. It's day 33, I guess, of the tournament because it is the day before the World Cup final. And it's Geoff Lemon and Firdose Moonda who will be looking over what is to come. We're doing this for Lacuna Sports. You can focus on your game when Lacuna have your kit covered. And that is the thing that all of the relevant players in the relevant teams have been able to do to focus on their games. That's what Laura Wolfart did in her semi-final. That's what Jemima Rodriguez did in her semi-final. Firdose, hello. You've had a couple of days. You've had some deep breaths. You've composed yourself. What is it now? How does it feel now to be eyeing off a final with the reality? This isn't just, I can't believe that just happened. It definitely happened, and here we are.
Yeah, really exciting because I think women's cricket has been desperate for a new winner and also desperate for a final that doesn't involve either Australia or England. So that's the first time in 50 over World Cup history that that's what we will be getting. And it's wonderful because it means that the gap is closing and that it's closing meaningfully. Of course, there are teams lagging far behind, but the next tier, which is India and South Africa, probably New Zealand would be in that tier as well, are catching up quickly, smartly. They're playing some great cricket. And I think pound for pound, India versus South Africa has the makings of what could be a really evenly matched final and an interesting final. I think if it was an Australia versus whoever in the final, we were probably looking at a bit of a blowout and a one-sided game. But I think now we've got the opportunity for the contest to be really gripping. And that's what I hope we get in Navi Mumbai, of course, weather permitting.
I think what it comes down to now is who can deal with the emotion better of the highs that they've both scaled, because you've got two teams that went against type. You've got, Australia and England are obviously the conventional favourites. They're the ones who've won all the World Cups, except for the couple that New Zealand have snuck in here or there. They're the teams that you expect to be there. They're the better resourced and so on. You're going into games against those teams with, of course, there's got to be some belief that you could beat them if you play well enough, but the knowledge that the reality of it is that that's less likely. They've always been there. And so if it seems to me like if one of those teams had made it through and the other unexpected side had their unexpected win and had that big emotional high, then you often see this in tournaments where the best games are the semi-finals, right? That's when there's so much energy goes into winning the semi-final that then the team that didn't expect to win the semi-final falls apart in the final. But now you've got two teams that didn't expect to win the semi-final, and they can't both fall apart. They might both fall apart to some extent. It might be a scrappy game. It might not be the cleanest, purest exhibition of skills, but one of them will have to fall apart less comprehensively than the other one eventually. Or maybe it's the opposite, and maybe they both surge in with tremendous confidence and we get the greatest final we've ever seen. But I think it at least avoids that dynamic where you've got the team that feels confident and knows that they've been there and done that, or at least some of their key players have, versus and even the other players would know, like, there's not as much pressure on, say, an Australian side to win a World Cup. Yes, they're supposed to win it. Yes, people will be annoyed if they don't, and people are annoyed that they didn't, but there's not that feeling for the players that this will be, we will be the pioneers, we will be the first from our country to do it, all of that sort of expectation. But that's there for both sides. That pressure's there for both sides, but that sense of newness, of a new field to conquer, is there for both sides as well. And that's what makes it so delectable.
Exactly. And look, the pressure on India, I think we must just take a moment to consider how enormous the pressure is on India now. They won a game that nobody would have dreamed that they could have won. So they chased the highest successful total in women's ODI history. Jemima Rodriguez, that comeback story, the redemption arc, it's all magical. It's like a fairy tale, really. And now that home crowd is thirsty and hungry, and they want it and they're desperate for it. And, Geoff, you and I have covered cricket in India, so we understand that it's fanatical. And when we use that word like religious, we don't mean it lightly. I think they, unlike South Africa, who really want to win and would love to win, but can get over it, I think for India, this is a Damascus Road type moment, where if they win, everything changes. And if they lose, I kind of fear that it will all just, the snowball will just go down the mountain. And then all that stuff we saw coming out about the woman shouldn't be playing, so-and-so is not good enough, and kind of the misogynistic weight of what is already in the nation will just land on them. So I feel for them, because I think it's really their tournament to lose now. From a South African perspective, I can tell you that, we've had a magical 2025. Everybody's so happy in the country. And I mentioned all the other sporting codes as well, because this is a country where we've got the matrix. It's not that kind of matrix. It's not just cricket. It's not just rugby. It's not just football. All the sports come together, that big three, and we kind of celebrate them all together. So people will, of course, be very sad and upset if South Africa don't win. But I think they'll also be like, you know what, they reached the final, great. And we've reached so many finals. I think if South Africa win, I said this at the World Test Championship final, that in South Africa, we had always said, once they win one World Cup, the floodgates are going to open and they're just going to win and win and win. So I'm kind of hoping that I didn't just say that to look like a fool and that maybe I was correct. But yes, you're absolutely right. This is about nerves. And South Africa, we saw, played their final before the final at last year's T20 World Cup. India played almost like a final before the final. Was it in 2017? Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
They played Australia, yeah. So you need them both to settle. There hasn't been a lot of time. And there's a lot of stuff. I mean, social media now wasn't what it was in 2017, right? So the Indian players particularly are going to be looking at all the stuff and picking up all the vibes, and it's at home. And how they settle and recoup is going to be interesting. At the same time, they might just ride that wave. This might be like that moment where they just get on it and they pulled up by 1.4 billion people, and look, nobody can compete against that.
And they've got options. They've got so many options. So they won that game without a significant contribution from Smriti Mandana, which would have seemed unthinkable if you just laid out the facts. India will make 340 batting second to win. Then you would assume that she would be making 140 of those. That would just be the natural assumption. They've got Shafali Verma, who was a gamble, who we talked about, who might have been a one-match gamble had they lost that, but now she gets to be a two-match gamble. So she gets another opportunity to do something explosive at the top. So they've got those resources that they didn't have to use, or didn't need those in order to get through to the final, who get another shot to go again. Plus they've got the players who did perform well, who've got the extra boost and confidence from that. So their possibility, like the options that are available to them, include, like you say, using that momentum. And it would do a lot in terms of the credibility of women's cricket in India to I mean, people like teams that win. And yeah, there is a misogynist bent to a bunch of the stuff that comes through, a bunch of the commentary that we see. But I think it's also worth remembering that dickheads who comment on the internet are not the whole world. They're a particular subset of very unpleasant people who like to be unpleasant for fun, and that doesn't mean that if people show you a video of a kid kicking puppies, it doesn't mean every kid kicks puppies. There's a confirmation bias kind of aspect to that, where I don't think we want to assume that the worst of the people on display are overly representative, but even though they're partly representative, so you don't want to go either way. But in terms of like the effect that it could have in India, yes, that seems clear with the WPL now happening and with the validation of that team, and there'd be a hunger for it, for more. There'd be a demand for more funding, better players, making sure that from that point on, it wouldn't be acceptable for India to be plucky runners up or whatever it is. What do you think it might be in South Africa if, like you're saying, that people would be philosophical about it if they didn't win, but if they did, is it important, like beyond just the excitement of it happening? Would there be a structural legacy? Would there be a difference in a win or a loss in terms of investment, in terms of belief, in terms of public support, that kind of thing? Do you think it could make or break some level of change?
Yeah, maybe not as extreme as make or break, because South Africa does have a professional domestic structure now, a 6-team structure. So I don't think winning would increase that or change that. And likewise, I don't think losing would change that. What it could do is that the South African women's team was sponsored by a financial services company for the last 12 years since they became professional. And that company helped establish the first professional contracts. They are no longer sponsors. So now I think what it could do is draw in a really big sponsor. and that could be ginormous for the women's game. I think they will find a sponsor irrespective, but obviously winning
Right.
means that the sponsor is now sponsoring a winning team. So I think that's where it could really help. The other thing that I think it will do, which I think could be really important for the game, is in the professional structure domestically at the moment. It's professional in name, but the salaries that are being paid are more like what a men's amateur team earns. So the women still have to have jobs. A lot of
Right.
them are students, so they're quite young, maybe still at school or just out of school studying towards their first qualifications, tertiary qualifications. So I think it could maybe increase the salaries at that level, and that we could look at the professional actually being a capital P professional, and for the women's team to have that. But in general, I think all it would do from a very kind of tangible perspective is rubber stamp what South Africa have been doing for the last 2 years. They're reaching finals, structures are working, the ecosystem's working. And beyond that, look, they do need a World Cup. They've got the World Test Championship, but to constantly get far enough in tournaments and then not get the trophy, I think does become a little bit deflating. So, I think it would make a big difference. And for the coach, Mandla Mashimbi, it would cement his legacy. For Laura Wolfart, for Marizanne Cup, it could also then do that. It could end the careers of Marizanne Cup and potentially Chloe Tryon.
If
And
they
maybe
win.
even if they win. Yeah, because then I think...
Because
I
they'd
think
say, okay, we're good now, we're done.
we're done. Maybe they'll push on to the
T20
T20
World
World
Cup,
Yeah,
6 months away, yeah.
6 months. But yeah, I think that's kind of what it will do. And I don't think it will have the ginormous effect that India winning will have on India and on the global game.
The stick of dynamite that got thrown into that dressing room, 2 or 3 years ago when a bunch of players quit and there was all of that discord, did that ultimately end up being beneficial for this team, or was it because at the time it seemed over the top that we're putting arbitrary fitness standards on players when it's not really relevant to what they do in the game, that sort of thing? Was it is that correlative or causative that this team now, like, did they get their shit together despite all of that discord, or did that discord actually help catalyze in some way them getting their shit together?
Yeah, I think a little bit of both. I think that really what the team needed, and it sounds so counterintuitive, is they needed a change in coach, because Hilton Meringue had been coaching the side for 11 years and
Forever,
there was
yeah.
a sense of fatigue,
Yeah.
with what he was doing. So the first change in coach came with Dylan Dupree, who was a stand-in coach and who the players really liked. But this next change of coach has been quite instrumental in what they're doing now, because Mandla Mashimbi comes from the men's setup, highly successful domestic coach, 9 titles as an assistant coach, 2 titles as a head coach. And he comes with a track record of winning and a track record of unearthing talent. So if you've heard of Dierwold Brevis, that is the player that Mandla Mashimbi insisted was signed by the provincial union he was playing at when he was just 17. And the union were a bit like, oh, this kid's a bit young. And Mandla said, sign him. I'm telling you to sign him. So he's got an eye for talent. He's got an eye for nurturing players. The other thing, which I think can be uncomfortable to talk about, but we probably should, is that along with Dane van Niekerk's retirement, and Dane may well come back into the setup, it also meant that when she left, one half of a relationship was no longer part of the team. And Dane's wife, Marizanne Cup, who still plays in the South African team, has now been playing without her partner, but also without her partner who was her captain. And I think those dynamics are quite complex. And what Laura Wolfart has managed to do is almost like what Mignon Dupree did. In Mignon, they used to call the mom, because she kind of mothered the team and nurtured all of them. Laura's too young to be a mom. I suppose she isn't actually. But she has done something in terms of diffusing a lot of the personal situations that were going on and just leading through action. I mean, you know that you saw us 469. And I think those dynamics are complex. And I think, Mandla Mashimbi in his pre-match press conference said there was a little bit of disharmony, or he used that sort of language and then quickly pulled back. Oh, no, but it wasn't anything with malice. But there was. That the team was a hot mess at one point, and that has definitely improved.
Around that time. Interesting. We'll look at the lineups after the break. A word for Lacuna Sports, because they've been our partners throughout this whole Women's World Cup. They've been terrific. They've been sending us information and material. They've been listening to the breaks. They've been talking to us about what we're talking about. And the main thing that they do is they make sure that women and girls play in clothing that fits them, with cricket equipment that fits them, that suits them, even down to selling the right size ball that you can use for training and that sort of thing. There are so many reasons why girls need different kit. They need their own stuff, not boys' stuff that's had the ends of the legs cut off or whatever it may be. And Lacuna will work with anybody. They'll work with individuals, with clubs. You can contact them. You can talk to them about what you need. And it's not just go in and pick something off a rack. It's go in and say, okay, we're going to need 17 bits of 17 uniforms for our team, and they're going to need to be in these sizes. And what does your team need? What's your changing room set up like? At what age group are the girls that are playing? What are the things that they may need that boys don't have to think about? And all of these things, like we've learned a lot, I think, over the last few weeks. Probably I've learned more than you have, Firdose, about kit in women's sport and what the things that you don't get from using men's and boys' clothing and equipment when women and girls need something else.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm glad you have, to be honest with you, I have learned a lot in terms of the different types of offerings too. Obviously, we know that tops need to be cut differently, and we've heard about things like period pants and colors of trousers that women are wearing while they're playing, or shorts that they're wearing. But I hadn't really thought about all the other things that we've been discussing, and it's pretty cool. My other job, I work as a yoga teacher, and yoga is also about the clothes. Like you got to turn up. You got to look the part. So it's all about, kind of the right fit and what makes you feel confident. Because ultimately, when you're dressed in a way that you're feeling confident, I think that you can put that aside and then let the rest of what your body is doing just do it. So it's been great to get involved and to learn all about this. And I hope they do a lot more and a lot kind of different ranges for all different types of women from different cultures as well. Because culturally, there's quite a lot that differs as well.
Exactly. Yeah, a lot of different shapes and sizes and all of the rest of it too. And those are all things that they can accommodate. So lacunasports.co.uk, go and check them out. Get in touch, see if they can help you with what you need. We'll be back in a second. It's the Final Word Daily. It's the preview, the World Cup final preview, and sort of casting our eye over these teams. There's not a lot that's likely to happen 11s-wise. I was just trying to get a gauge on South Africa before we were talking, because they've got that issue that you were looking at with their bowling where, maybe they want to bring Masa Butterclass back in. That does weaken their batting, but then they've got a couple of players who've contributed nothing in terms of runs. So Anneke Bosch and Annerie Dirksen, between them, I think have batted 9 times in this World Cup, and they've collectively got 1 score in double figures. So there's not a lot of point picking, a specialist bat in terms of Bosch, or, Dirksen theoretically can bowl a bit but hasn't been bowling. So does it matter if you got 3 number 11s if the players up the order who are picked to score runs haven't been doing it?
Yeah, I guess not. I mean, you don't want 5 number 11s, which is maybe what they have now. And I think it's about who they choose to leave out. So Anneke Bosch, of course, brings experience and has that wonderful performance against Australia at last year's T20 World Cup semi-final. But Annerie Dirksen came off a tour in Sri Lanka where she scored her maiden one-day 100 as well as 2 half-centuries. Unfortunately, we've not really seen that from her at this tournament. I think considering experience is maybe what you want in a final, they'll keep Bosch and ditch Dirksen and then bring Masa Butterclass into the 11. But, who knows, maybe they decide they want the injection of youth instead. And so then you keep Dirksen and you ditch Bosch and say, look, you've had your chance. It hasn't worked for you. But I absolutely think Masa Butterclass must play. It'll be a bouncier pitch than it was in Guwahati, which is why they, went for that type of combination. It'll probably swing around a little bit. That's her type of bowling. And, it'll also be her last World Cup. And she's got such a wonderful story, Masa Butterclass. She's mum to, she must be 11 or 12 years old now, Masa Butter's daughter. She quit cricket after having her baby because she couldn't fathom how she was going to raise a child and play. And then eventually her mum came to help her. So Masa Butter's daughter raised by her mum. And it was in fact Masa Butter's daughter who also helped Tasman Brits come up with the ballerina celebration, which is for her father, like a daddy's little girl celebration. But then it's also with Masa Butter's daughter, something really fun that they enjoy together. They come from the same part of the country. So yeah, it'd be great to see her play one last time. And I think it could be that for her as well.
Right. In terms of the way that they were set up in the semi-final, where they've got Mlaba, they've got Ayabonga Kaka, they've got de Klerk, Tryon, and then Marizanne Kapp. Those were their 5. And then they could go to Sunelis if they had to, which, she always seems like she doesn't want to bowl. But, if she must. Do we know if they're playing on a new strip for the final at Mumbai? You would
Yeah, I
assume
don't
so,
actually
but
know that yet. I would think so because that would seem like a sensible thing to do for the final. Yeah,
but there were so
I
many runs in that semi-final pitch that I don't know.
you might as well
Like
keep
I reckon you want either you could say you want bowling options, or it doesn't matter if you got bowling options because everyone's going to get tonked anyway.
it. Fair point, actually. But I also think, Jeff, I don't know if you were coming to India next because I think
Mm,
they will have to make a change.
okay.
I liked the six bowler combination, although they conceded 338 runs, which didn't
Hmm.
obviously matter in the end. I don't think Radha Yadav is the answer. I think they might keep her against South Africa because South Africa have lost, I think it's 13 wickets to left arm spin at this tournament.
Mm,
No, that sounds like too few, 18 maybe.
yeah.
So I think they might
But
keep her
she's
for that reason.
historically a much better player than she was in that semi-final.
Sure.
I mean, she just hasn't been playing very much. She was benched until the Bangladesh game, which ended up getting half rained off anyway. And I mean, Radha Yadav at her best, I think, is certainly at the level at the level required. It's whether after an expensive outing in the semi, whether she can get herself together and go again. I think she could be an asset if she's there.
You don't think they'll include Sneh Rana for a little bit of extra batting as well because she
Yeah,
does bring quality.
and she's mongrel. I mean, she's an absolute favorite player because she doesn't like to fucking lose. You know, there's a Sneh Rana bit where she just kind of sinks her teeth into the opposition's forearm
Yeah.
and just won't let go. So I'm surprised that they'd sort of ever put a team out on the puck, but it's a bit like it was with Jadeja for a while on the men's side, where you go, well, how are you not picking this player? Because you know they could win a match for you in either discipline, depending how things go. And she certainly dug them out of holes with the bat. So yeah, in terms of mongrel, she's the pick. But Radha Yadav is quality. It's just whether they're confident that she can actually bring that quality in the final, whether she's had enough cricket to get into that kind of groove. Because when she's in a groove, I mean, she held the world record for consecutive innings taking a wicket. You know, she had been, I think that was in T20 internationals from memory, but you know, an extraordinary player when she's up and going. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it all pans out. And so much of it's just going to be vibes. It's just going to be attitude. It's going to be who keeps their cool rather than who is good enough to beat who, because either of these teams is good enough to beat the other one. It's just whether they keep it together upstairs.
Yeah, I think the atmosphere is going to be absolutely amazing. We've seen that when India play, the fans come, so we're expecting more than 40,000 people there. You know, the one thing I've seen change over the years covering cricket in India is that there used to be a time when the fans would come to watch the cricket and they were very appreciative of opposition performances. I remember a packed Nagpur press box rising to applaud a South African 100 at the 2011 World Cup. And India lost that game. And the press box actually were congratulating the South African team. And it's very different. Fast forward to 2023, and I remember absolute deathly silence every time anything happened. That meant that India were not going to progress any further, or, you know, especially in the final was a very strange affair. So I hope that the crowd gets into the game and not just supporting India. And I hope that,
Yep.
you know, if South Africa happen to be getting moments where they're on top or if they win the thing, then there's some appreciation for that because they're also a team that works very hard. And, you know, we mentioned right at the beginning, Australia, England, etc. I was talking to someone involved in South African cricket earlier today, and they said, you know, what England spends on their women's team is what South Africa spends on cricket, the whole thing. Men, women, everything. So that just gives you an idea of where they're coming from. So I hope people appreciate the occasion and embrace both teams. Of course, the home crowd must support their team because, you know, that's what they will probably do. And they must enjoy themselves. And I hope it stays, I hope it's a nice environment. I hope it's fun.
I hope it is too. We will be there, of course, because why wouldn't we be? It's the World Cup final. That's what we've been leading up towards this whole time. Thank you, Firdose Moonda. You'll be there with us for the final. And I hope that anyone listening or watching, if you watch this instead, I hope that you are there with us as well. It's been the Final Word Women's World Cup Daily. We will see you after the big one.